So now that we have an understanding of how social and gender norms, how they influence corruption behavior, what are some of the considerations for social norm change in the anti-corruption space? That is what I will be speaking about. Next slide. So within the field of changing social norms, there are a number of assumptions we do, a number of assumptions we make. Tyra, if we can go to the next slide. And one of the things that are key is that we know that that change is not just about communicating knowledge to people. Knowledge could be an entry point, but knowledge does not change deeply entrenched social norms that drive corrupt behavior, for example. So if you have this assumption that when you change knowledge, it is going to translate into behavior change, when there are very strong social sanctions that are associated with breaking a norm, then you may not get very far. Next slide. And the other bit actually is that the way social norms change is that change happens when enough people see that enough people are changing. So, for example, public declarations are very important for people to know that their neighbors are changing and it is safe for them to change, that they are not going to suffer backlash, they are not going to be suffering from severe social sanctions, that actually they were thinking that people have not changed, but actually change has started happening, and they also join on board. And on the next slide, the other aspect that you have to pay attention to is that strong norms take more time to achieve. Like Diana and Chiane were saying, some norms have severe social sanctions. Those and they are widely shared. Sometimes we call them meta norms, and these will need a critical mass to create change, and they may take a while, but they change. It means that your strategies the strategies for social norm change need to take into account the strengths of the norm. And here you will need a critical mass. Next slide. So as you are planning your social norm change strategies or gender norm change strategies, you must think of integrating them within the theory of change, within that philosophical understanding of what the problem is and what the solution is. So you have to take into account what is the goal. The goal, for example, is the intervention supposed to stop an old norm? Is it supposed to create a new norm? And how then? What other factors beyond the norms are also driving this change? Should you be thinking about other structural factors that combine with norms? So theory of change becomes very important as you think about norm change. Next slide. And there are a number of strategies that I will be taking you through very briefly that are very important for norm change, including mass media, personalized feedback, group discussions, role models, and social networks. But most importantly, on the next slide, I say that particularly for the laws, it is very important to make sure that until there are social sanctions from the community enforcing the laws, they will not change norms. So in a lot of anti-corruption work, the focus is on strengthening the laws, strengthening formal retribution, but actually the informality is very important. For example, in Bogota, one of the mayors succeeded in changing norms only by making sure that there was social pressure on those who do not adhere to the norm. In others, the law became the new norm, and there were social sanctions from the communities for those who were not adhering to the norm. So if you want the law to work, there must be social sanctions from the community that help in enforcing the law. If that is not the case, there might be challenges. Because in societies, especially in low and middle-income countries, where collectivism is very strong, the laws are the formal is weaker than the informal. So the informal norms take the day. Next slide. And when it comes to mass media, it is important that mass media is not just speaking about the negative norms, everybody to be aware of them, because it will simply be reinforcing those norms. It should focus on norm change, for example, positive messaging to show the benefits of changing the norm through the various techniques like radio broadcasts, billboards, theater plays, role model approaches, among others. But once it does not focus on changing the norm, then it might simply be reinforcing the negative norm. This is extremely important. Next slide. The other strategy we normally use is what we call personalized normative feedback. And here, providing personalized information about how one performs compared to the peers. So we all belong to networks, we belong to peers, and if you show people or communities how they are performing compared to their peers, that can be an incentive for them to change. So peer-led approaches and role modeling approaches then are extremely important in this case. Next slide. And then it is the other strategies, the group conversations. And the most important thing about the unique thing about these conversations is that they should allow critical reflection. They should be able to allow critical reflection, and they should be able to promote organized diffusion to ensure wider reach of information and learning among the target audiences. And as I wind up, next slide. Role models and social networks are extremely important. But as we think about role models and social networks, you have to think about, for example, the gender expectations. You might have to have separate sessions with women and separate sessions with men. Role models that work for men may not be the same role models that work for the women. Like in Nigeria, where we found that direct social pressures on health workers, men and women are different, you must make sure that even as you are role modeling, you take care of the differences in the social expectations based on gender norms. Next slide. And of course, you can mix, changing social norms might mean mixing several strategies, mixing community conversations with personalized feedback, with the laws, among others. So you don't just use one approach, but you use multi-pronged approaches. But by and large, as I wrap up on the next slide, I just want to emphasize the fact that layering is extremely important, because you may not find social norm programs or gender norms programs that stand alone. They might be part of larger programs. So it is important to ensure that as you do the theory of change, there are pathways clearly that are going to help you examine the intersections between social norms and gender norms, intersections, gender expectations that are very important in driving corruption. And ideally, this should come from formative studies. But it is so important for you to ensure that as you are designing these programs, the gender expectations are well spelled out right from the inception or the formative study, through collecting data, through the co-design workshops, in order for you to really be able to make peace, social and gender norm change from an intersectional perspective.